The UFC women's featherweight division has been, for the most part, well, it hasn't really been much of anything. When you look at it, we've had one fight. It was a title fight. It was a controversial fight. Germaine de Randamie won the title. That's who I predicted to win. You know, I thought she did win. It wasn't a great performance. But the biggest thing is the best women's featherweight fighter, probably the best women's fighter on the planet, was not in the fight. She was on the sidelines watching, wondering why she wasn't included. And now Germaine de Randamie, when asked, will you fight Cyborg? I said no, she won't. And she gave her reasons why she would not entertain a matchup with the former Strikeforce and Invicta champion. I guess and it's the division just kind of falling apart as a result. Now de Randamie's even saying she's going to go back to bantamweight. And it's really unfortunate. You know, women's MMA has made major progress with the UFC introducing both 115 and 135 pound divisions. But the fear initially of Ronda Rousey prevented them from going to 125 pounds, afraid that a lot of fighters would drop down a division. And then the 145 pound division, some people questioned the talent level and felt that a lot of girls that could fight at 145 were making the cut to 135 to avoid Cyborg. And now here we are, no Ronda Rousey, Cyborg still looming large, and yet they can't get 135 pounds off the ground. I'd like to see it happen, but I don't know if it will or not. The 125 pound division, I'm excited for that, so let's look forward to that. We have our own featherweight fight to talk about. It has its own set of controversial factors involved. We'll talk about that later. Welcome back to Kamikaze Overdrive MMA Predictions. As always, I am your host, Scott Johnson. On this episode of the show, we are breaking down the upcoming UFC 212 event, which will take place in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil on June 3rd, featuring, as I mentioned, the featherweight championship fight between current champion José Aldo and interim champion Max Holloway. All 5 of my main card predictions will be broken down on this episode of the show. All of my preliminary picks will be available at kamikazeoverdrive.net. So you can go there and check those out. You can also go and vote in the polls and see whoever the public is backing in each one of these fights. I do it for all my pay-per-views, so please check them out. Additionally, my bet packs will be for sale. $15 for complete fight card breakdowns. I also give fantasy picks for DraftKings players. You can get a subscription, save yourself some bucks. I haven't been doing it very well lately. You know, we've had some tough shows of late, and that's been very unfortunate. You know, you look at the last show, it went 6-6. There were 6 underdogs in 12 fights. I predicted one correctly. And you look at the way the card started, I could easily have been 4-0 right off the bat. I would actually have been away to the races had I won. You know, I had 2 fights ending with come from behind wins with my fighter ahead in the final round, and I had 1 fight ending in a controversial split decision where I felt my fighter had done enough to win the fight. Either way, that's the way it goes, and hopefully things turn around. That's all we can do. Keep working, keep putting in the hours, and hopefully it turns in our favor. On that note, let's hope it turns in our favor quickly. Let's get to that first main card prediction. Fight number 1 on the main card takes place in the UFC's welterweight division, featuring Erick Silva, 19 wins, 7 losses, and 1 no contest, taking on Yancy Medeiros, 13 wins, 4 losses, and 1 no contest on his record as well. Now, looking at Silva, he's coming off a big win that snapped a 2-fight losing streak. He had a come-from-behind victory over Luan Chagas in a very entertaining bout. Previously, he had lost a split decision to Neil Magny and a knockout upset against Nordine Taleb. For Medeiros, he has alternated wins and losses over his last 5 fights, which included a controversial split decision win over John McDessie, which kind of kept his record from really dropping off the table. He's coming off a solid win over Sean Spencer, a knockout win, which was his first fight in the UFC's welterweight division. Physically, Silva 2 inches taller. He'll have a 1-inch, it's actually a 1-inch reach advantage for the American. Medeiros is the younger man by 3 years, and keep in mind, Yancy actually fought at middleweight and higher prior to this, and spent all of his UFC career prior to his last fight in the lightweight division. So he's moved around a little bit. Seems like welterweight might be the place for him. Now looking at the numbers, Silva is 6-1 in the UFC in fights that end in the first round. Technically 7-0 if you really want to look at performance-wise, as he has that one controversial disqualification included in that. That was his 1 loss. Conversely, he is 1-5 in fights that go outside the opening round. That's crazy. Now, he is coming off that 1 victory, and that's worth noting. He's coming off that 1 win over Luan Chagas. It went down in the 3rd round. Now, he was slowing down in that fight, but he was throwing less spinning attacks, less explosive offense, more conservative or at least more functional attacks that would help him to stay fresher longer and eventually get the win as a result. Looking at Medeiros' numbers for just by comparison, he is 2-3 in fights that end in the opening round, 3-1 beyond the first round. So you certainly see an advantage to Yancy if he can get this fight outside of the opening round, at least against the old Erick Silva. I don't know. It could be the new Erick Silva as well. We have a very small sample size there. Additionally, more statistics. Silva 1-3 in fights transpiring outside of Brazil when fighting in the UFC, 6-3 in his home country. So that's a big advantage for him. Overall, he's a very capable striker. He's an exceptionally dangerous grappler. He's really dangerous everywhere, and he's underperformed at times, and he just can't seem to string big wins together to build any momentum. When striking, he has a lead left jab, which is very good, a solid, very heavy right hook that he comes behind it with. He'll make some uppercuts. He dropped Chagas late in that a couple different times actually. He did a number on him. He also got dropped a couple of times, but he has a very hard right back leg body kick. That he can do a lot of damage against southpaw fighters, which is something we could see him do. He will target the inside of the leg as well, and he'll throw a nice turning side kick in. It's those explosive spinning kicks he wants to, at least spread out a little bit, avoid going full bore with them and wearing yourself down, like when he fought John Fitch and he just exhausted himself trying all these things because he wanted to finish them, and they're just that fight IQ question mark has always been an issue with Silva. Now, on the ground, he's a very talented grappler. He has a very heavy grappling base. He just seems to really overwhelm guys with his size, really leans on his opponents, can transition well, and once he gets your back, you're in trouble. He knows how to finish once he gets you in that position. He's just very hard to handle on the mat, especially early on. Now, as I mentioned, he was dropped by Chagas on a couple of occasions in that fight. His chin's a bit of a question mark. He's been knocked out on a couple of occasions, and his chin's a bit of a question mark. He tends to wait on his opponents a little bit. Again, that was part of the revamp of his offense and attempts to become a more capable fighter in the longer rounds. But if his opponents can pressure him and not slow down, it's going to be pretty difficult for him to deal with. Now for Medeiros, the big thing right off the bat you got to look at is he's been training alongside Max Holloway, who's preparing for his title fight. And there's two schools of thought there, and they both have a lot of valid points behind them. Either we've got a pair of fighters that are both peaking at the same time, pushing each other and forcing each other to be at their best and ready for the fights, and that's fantastic. On the other side of things, you have this question of, obviously we're getting Max Holloway ready for a featherweight title fight. How much focus is it equal focus being put into Yancy Medeiros' preparation? Obviously, he has coaches that'll focus on him as well, but you have to wonder, is he getting the full attention he should be getting when he's fighting the opening fight of the pay-per-view and Max is fighting for the title against a legend in Brazil? So that's just two schools of thought there. It's hard to see. Now, when you look at Medeiros in his last fight, he came out fighting southpaw and spent the entire first round southpaw against Sean Spencer, which again opens him up for that power right body kick of Silva's. He could switch knowing that's there, but it's just something he looked very good from that stance, and I wonder if he won't do it again. Medeiros was a long lead right hand. He will fire at straight left as well. He's got some good left leg body kicks. He'll throw a front kick to the body as well. He'll go high with some of his strikes, but not necessarily all the time. He did ultimately rock Sean Spencer with a head kick before finishing on the mat. Look for some knees to the body, and he'll throw some spinning kicks as well. So it's a very good stylistic matchup that they've put together here. Now, defensively, there's some issues for Medeiros. He holds his head a little bit too high. He's a tall guy to start with, but he holds his head up a little bit too high. He'll slip out of range well, but again, he's retreating with his head up, which if his opponent can follow him, they certainly can take advantage of that. Additionally, he gets hit a lot. Averages 4.1 strikes landed per minute, gives up 4.88 strikes absorbed per minute. That's for a volume striker, that's not exactly numbers you expect to see. He's been hurt to the body before, and he's been cracked with some big hands. Right hand for Spencer got through a couple times. Francisco Trinaldo hurt him in a couple of exchanges when they were brawling it up. So certainly Medeiros is there to be hurt. We know Dustin Poirier put him away. Poirier put him away on the feet. Now, Yancy's not much of a wrestler, but he's shown massive improvements in his submission game. But Silva, at least when Silva's doesn't have his wits about him. When Medeiros, when he fought Trinaldo, he tried to draw him in and grapple him and really push him into rounds 2 and 3. And I think he could try and do something similar to Silva, grapple with him on the cage at least, clinch up with him, push him, force him into those later rounds and test his heart, test his durability, see if Silva has made those appropriate adjustments. But for my money, Yancy gets hit a lot. Body and chin are both points of vulnerability. He stands too high. Again, he says he pulls back with his chin up. Silva's a big middleweight with a lot of power, big welterweight with a lot of power. I think he's going to be too much for Medeiros in the striking exchanges with that power. He's going to be too much if they hit the mat. I think look for Silva to land the more powerful strikes overall, potentially get the fight to the ground either with a knockdown or a takedown. And my prediction is Erick Silva to defeat Yancy Medeiros by submission. Next, we've got a fight that could absolutely be a nightmare for the play-by-play crew as we head to the UFC's middleweight division as Paulo Borrachinha, again, I'm probably butchering that, of Brazil, undefeated at 9-0, takes on Oluwale Bamgbose, who goes also by the Holy War Angel, who doesn't nowadays. He has a current record of 6 wins and 2 defeats. Now, Bamgbose is 1-2 in the UFC, first 2 losses of his career. He had never fought and he's never fought outside the United States. So that's worth noting as well. So this is his first time traveling outside the U.S., traveling abroad to compete. For Borrachinha, a 77-second TKO win in his debut. He is undefeated. He's never fought outside of Brazil, but not an issue since he is fighting in Brazil for this fight. Now, Borrachinha, 2 inches taller. Bamgbose, though, will have a marked 6-inch reach advantage. He is 4 years older than the Brazilian, but he's been out of action for 13 months. Pulled over one of his last fights. One of his last fights didn't go down, so certainly that's disappointing for him. But still, that's a long time to be out of action. Now for Bamgbose, all 6 of his wins by knockout. All in round 1, 3 inside 90 seconds. For Borrachinha, 8 of his 9 wins have come by knockout, 1 by submission, so all finishes, all in round 1. Great matchmaking there as far as what the stats say and what we would expect to get inside the octagon. Now, of course, we just saw with Razak Al Hassan in his last fight, a guy who's got a lot of early quick knockouts. Eventually, that's going to come to an end. Well, here you get 2 guys who it could come to an end mutually, that style, or it could, self-fulfilling prophecy. One of these guys is going out on a stretcher. Now, Borrachinha has good power in his hands. He moves very well, throws a solid 1-2, and will dig to the body as well. His kicking game is fairly effective, pretty hard. Will mix in some heavy body kicks and high kicks. He has a nice long spearing jab, which he'll follow that hit with his right hand. Decent accuracy overall. I really like the power he brings, and his technique is solid. He'll maintain good pressure, really keeps his opponent's back, fighting off the cage, and limits their space to evade his offense and kind of move back to cushion the blow. If the fight hits the ground, he's shown good ground and pound to finish fights. He's shown a couple submission wins, one as a pro, one on the Ultimate Fighter. He will forego offense for defense, which hasn't really cost him yet as a professional. Now for Bamgbose, he went outside the first round in his last fight for the first time, and it did not go very well. He lost a decision. He throws a lot of fakes and feints. He's an unorthodox striker. He'll switch stances, a lot of broken footwork. He's training some wushu and bringing that into his techniques. He'll launch himself into his striking, his strikes. It increases the power, but it limits his ability to, do it consistently. Not a ton of volume. He throws a good right hook, a left jab as well. He'll throw some hard low kicks and mix them in, and again, it's a lot of single strikes. When he fought Sarafian, he landed a brutal head kick. Actually stunned him through his guard and landed some big ground and pound to finish the fight. We actually saw that before outside the UFC, landing some big head kicks that his opponents thought they had blocked, and he's able to shut down and keep and finish them, despite the fact they got their hand up. Now, when he fought Fajeda, he struggled early on to find, to land his strikes, and eventually get taken down, and the fight was pretty much over from then on out. Ground game overall has been a major issue for him. Both his losses came when he was on his back. I doubt this fight, requires the judges and the gas tank. The gas tank of both guys, certainly with short fighting notice, it's not suggesting this fight will go long. It could go deeper, and then it turns into a sloppy mess, and that's why we end up with a decision. But I think the biggest question mark overall is the ground game of Bamgbose and how it will hold up against Borrachinha. He has a submission win. He's got some good ground and pound, and we have seen and done some research and seen that he will go for takedowns should the situation present itself. He could look to score some early takedowns early and early take this fight where he might have a wider advantage. I think overall his speed and aggression and his more linear attacks is going to keep Oluwale backing up, and it's going to keep Oluwale on the defensive. The threat of the takedown might add to that, but I think Borrachinha just beats him to the punch, and my prediction is Paulo Borrachinha to defeat Oluwale Bamgbose by knockout. Up next, we move to the UFC's middleweight division for a fight that probably would have been super relevant a number of years ago, and now it's just a battle of 2 older fighters near the end of their careers looking to hold on for at least one more match. We feature former UFC champion, number 11th ranked Vitor the Phenom Belfort, 25-13-0, taking on the self-proclaimed Nate the Great Marquardt with a record 38 wins, 16 losses, and 3 draws. Now, Belfort's coming off a knockout loss turned no contest. He is winless in his last 3 and just 1 victory in his last 5 fights. For Marquardt, he most recently lost a decision to Sam Alvey. He is just 3-7 over his last 10 appearances. Both guys are 6 feet tall. Both have a 74-inch reach. Belfort's 40 years old. Marquardt is 38. Both at the end, but instead trying to hold on. Now, Belfort has talked about continuing his UFC or his MMA career after the UFC. This is his final fight on his contract. Obviously, Bellator is an option. Ryzen might be more appropriate for him, or Risen, whatever the hell it's called. Simply because he might be able to get back into that TRT to get that physical boost he so desperately needs. Now, looking at their numbers, 93 combined fights. Big stats to stand out over those 93 combined fights. Belfort 6 losses by knockout. Marquardt 5 losses by knockout. Nate has 11 KO victories. Belfort has 18 knockout victories. You probably get the vibe I am jiving here that this fight is probably not going to the scorecards. And probably that's good for the Brazilian. Belfort's style is not built for long fights and to win decisions. His cardio is a major liability. And he's a quality over quantity striker. Not a ton of volume. He throws in bursts, looking to unload and finish fights with 1 or 2 big opportunities. Still throwing with power in his hands overall. And in some of his kicks. His kicks they highlighted his resurgence in his TRT time, but certainly they're not what they used to be, but they're still there. Now, when he fought Mousasi, he was backed up against the cage. Mousasi really cut off the cage and effectively. Belfort was firing back, but he was overwhelmed and eventually finished. He has been criticized. He has actually openly criticized himself for not attacking, not being more aggressive, not engaging. But again, with the heart and the mind and the want and what the body's able to do are 2 entirely different things. Now, Vitor's recent defeats have come on the mat, a couple of knockouts and a submission, where he just gets overwhelmed once he hits the ground. He's not what he used to be as far as danger is concerned. Now, the thing to keep in mind, though, is that the Gastelum loss was the first time we saw him, or at least recent memory, saw him cracked and really obliterated on the feet, knocked out, if you will. He was finished on the ground, but it was a formality. We've seen him hurt on the feet, but that was a really significant knockdown there. Now, looking at Marquardt, he's a dangerous fighter in multiple areas, especially on the mat and on the feet. He has submission skills and he has power. He has big power in his right hand. We saw him, and that's something Joe Rogan talks about. It's the last thing to go for older fighters is they still have that big power if they can connect flush. It's just their ability to find that opening to land that strike. Now, you can see Dalway. Dalway ran face first into the KO. He knocked him out with a big right hand. Prior to that, Nate didn't look that great. He was pretty tentative on his feet. He tends to hold back and not let his hands go. Even when he's in his prime, he has some issues, really attacking and engaging at times. He talked about wanting to wrestle with Sam Alvey and to really grind him up against the cage. That was something we didn't see him do enough of. There's a very good chance we could see him against Belfort here and try and put him on the mat and create some of those scenarios that Vitor struggled in previously. Nate has been working with Trevor Whitman, trying to rejuvenate his striking. He talked about wanting to retire if he didn't get the opportunity to go back and train with Whitman. And again, the UFC hypes that up a little bit, saying, "Oh, look how much better he is," especially when he knocked out CB Holloway. But I only paid so much attention to that, honestly. When he did fight Alvey, and he found his most success when he jumped in and doubled up, tripled up his right, and just let his hands go, but he just wasn't doing it enough. And his corner was imploring him, go first, go attack, do not hesitate, and he simply wasn't doing it. Now, Nate, he might be in a better place physically, a little bit younger, but Vitor has more self-belief, and he's fighting at home, which is huge. He'll be pushed by that crowd. Nate could alter his normal approach, as I said, look for the takedowns, but I think he needs to get this fight into rounds 2 and 3 to really have a chance to win it. I think Belfort, who's shown toughness against elite-level competition, he's fighting some pretty good guys who are right at the top. I think Belfort's going to capitalize on Marquardt's hesitations, that he holds back a little bit. He's going to be able to come in and get a couple of those bursts through where he just flurries and looks to knock guys out. And he'll eventually take advantage of Nate's pretty questionable chin, and my prediction is Vitor Belfort to defeat Nate Marquardt by knockout. In the co-main event of the evening, number 1 ranked Claudia Gadelha, 13-2-0, takes on the number 2 ranked Karolina Kowalkiewicz, 10-1-0. They're fighting in the UFC's women's strawweight division. Now, this could very easily be a number 1 contenders bout or title eliminator fight, but unfortunately both fighters are coming off recent defeats against the champion. Both had their moments, but simply not enough to wrestle that title belt away from Joanna Champion. Now, Claudia got back in the win column in her most recent appearance, defeating Courtney Casey. Now, for Karolina Kowalkiewicz, she is looking to do the same here. So the fact there is a real legitimate chance she'll have a post-title fight letdown, that is a scenario we're paying close attention to. For Karolina, she's had an impressive run. Wins over Randa Marcos, Heather Jo Clark, and a gutsy performance coming from behind to beat Rose Namajunas. For Claudia, she had dominant victories over Aguilera and Casey, the split decision loss to Jędrzejczyk prior to the title fight loss. A lot of people felt she had done enough to win that matchup and could have gone on to fight the title as a result. Now, Claudia is 1 inch taller. She'll have a 2 inch reach advantage, 2 inch reach advantage for the Polish fighter, and Gadelha is the younger fighter by 3 years. Now, looking at the Brazilian first, she closes the distance behind her punches. She has a tendency at times to come in high. She really needs to make sure she lowers her hips when shooting to, get the most out of her takedowns. Look for her to push her opponents into the cage and drag them down from that position. She's not a big top position striker, and she can't expend a lot of energy looking to get the fight to the ground, so she needs to work on maximizing the value of those takedowns once she gets to the floor. She has power when she's striking, but she has a tendency to force her strikes. She's a little bit stiff. She'll throw some single strikes. Again, she showed improvement against Jędrzejczyk, and we have seen signs that things are getting better for her. She was landing some decent flurries in the Aguilera fight, finished with a tie clinch and locked up some knees when they did get in, or landed some knees when they did get in close. She dropped Jędrzejczyk a couple times in that fight, especially early on, landing a straight left, and she did against Aguilera land over 117 strikes. So those are numbers that are indicative of a fighter that's improving their striking. Now, for Kowalkiewicz, she's a striker in this matchup. High volume striker, good combination. She has a nice left jab, a straight right. A sneaky little uppercut she'll work in. She'll throw elbows at range, which is a technique I like to see. She'll mix in some turning side kicks, and she's a counter striker as well. Look for her to finish her combinations with a variety of different techniques. She'll go with a low kick one time, a high kick the next time, then she'll mix in a knee, and she does a nice job of just varying her offense, or her punctuation marks on her combinations to keep her opponents guessing. Now, one thing I've picked up on with Karolina, she tends to be a bit of a slow starter. She's actually been outstruck in all 4 of the opening rounds of her 4 UFC fights, despite the fact that she won 3. Now, she has a tendency to push forward, but not literally let her hands go, and Rose was chewing her up whenever she did that. We saw Karolina getting cracked at range at times, and the strikes tend to come over top of her guard. She holds her hands a little bit low, which can open her up to getting hit a little bit. Her clinch is actually one of her better positions. She can work on the inside, or control her opponent's head, land some strikes off the break, and mix in those knees. And in the Rose fight, she really turned the fight around in that position, using knees in the clinch, elbows, attacking the body with short strikes, and it really was a very effective technique overall that really took away Rose's win. And she could look through that against a fighter who's had some issues with cardio as well. She had her moments against Jędrzejczyk, but again, she showed how tough she was. She turned that fight a little bit around later in the matchup, but just couldn't do enough to get the victory. Her takedown defense is something we put on display here. She's been decent, giving up a couple here or there, but not really tested like she will be in this matchup. And that's something I think Claudia is going to look to expose here. Post-title fight letdown scenario and fighting in Brazil are both going to be tough for Karolina. She is the slightly less nasty version of Joanna Jędrzejczyk as far as I am concerned. Gadelha, I think she'll capitalize on that. Claudia is going to benefit from not having to go 5 rounds and essentially only needing to win 2 rounds and then simply hold on. Her cardio and her style is not meant to go deep into fights, as not yet anyway. That slow start that Karolina usually experiences is going to allow Claudia to establish her ground game and get going, get ahead, and kind of take control of the fight and get in a better spot and force Karolina to try and come from behind, and she simply won't have enough time. Claudia will establish those early takedowns. She's going to grind Karolina out on the cage and on the floor, and I think Karolina is going to really struggle off her back with that heavy top game that Claudia brings, and my prediction is Claudia Gadelha to defeat Karolina Kowalkiewicz by decision. We move now to the main event of the evening. It will take place in the UFC's featherweight division as longtime champion José Aldo, 26-2-0, and I say that longtime champion with an asterisk, takes on interim title holder Blessed Max Holloway, the current record of 17 wins and 3 defeats. Now, this is for the undisputed featherweight championship, but keep in mind, as I said with the asterisk, José Aldo lost the title to Conor McGregor. He then won an interim title fight at UFC 200 against Frankie Edgar. He became the champion when Conor relinquished the belt after winning the lightweight title. So it was the second time in the UFC's history that they handed José a belt and said, here, you're the official champion, going back to when he debuted coming out of the WEC. Now, Holloway won his interim title fight against former lightweight champion Anthony Pettis, who was 1-0 at featherweight at the time and is 1-4 in his last 5 fights. Not to diminish what Holloway has done of late, but still, you see the circumstances I'm questioning coming into this matchup. There's some bumps and bangs along the way for these two belts. They're not perfect, shiny, clean. Now, Aldo is champion, despite what he's accomplished, despite what he's done. It's a hard sell for me, considering how easily Conor McGregor dispatched him. Conversely, Max Holloway beating Aldo, I think, makes him champion in my books. He beats the guy that Conor beats, so it's kind of like they're both in the same plateau, and then Max opts to continue on in a pattern of defending the title belt. And I like that. Actually, Conor, to tell you the truth, is the last man to beat both these guys. That's worth noting as well. And I'm not a big Conor McGregor fan, so I'm going to stop talking about him. Now, Max has wins over Cub Swanson, Jeremy Stevens, Ricardo Lamas, Anthony Pettis, all impressive. Frankie Edgar, Chad Mendes, of course, not in the picture right now. Frankie Edgar's a guy that is certainly waiting in the wings, especially if Max wins. He'll be the first in line to fight for the title, I would expect, unless this is a controversial or a close fight. For Aldo, he has wins over Frankie Edgar twice, Chad Mendes twice, Ricardo Lamas, Korean Zombie. Who's next for him if he retains the belt? Do they give Frankie Edgar the next opportunity? It's kind of a odd situation there. Physically, Holloway 4 inches taller, have a 1-inch reach advantage. Aldo will have a 1-inch reach advantage, and Max is the younger man by 5 years. Aldo's only 30 years old, which is something that catches a lot of people off guard. They have him in the 32, 33-year range. He's just 30, folks. Now, the perceived way to beat the current Brazilian holder of the belt is to push him hard early, compromise his gas tank, and take over the fight late. Frankie Edgar had a little bit of success in their first encounter, not so much in the second encounter, but that's what the general idea is against Aldo. Holloway is a volume striker, so right off the bat we say, can he do this? 100-plus significant strikes on 4 different occasions. 103 against Ricardo Lamas, not the most, but against the most significant opponent. He's a death by accumulation fighter, averaging 5.67 strikes per minute. He has excellent cardio, good timing on his strikes. He throws very long techniques. He mixes everything up very well, and the impact and the power of his strikes is very much improving as he gets a little bit older, a little bit stronger. The question is, can he reach Aldo? Edgar certainly couldn't with enough to really affect him. Holloway is taller, but he doesn't have that reach advantage that he traditionally has against a lot of opponents. But again, he's a varied striker. That long right jab will come into effect here. Spinning attacks, he will counter. He'll attack the body. He'll wear his opponents down. Is he quick enough to take on Aldo? That's a major question mark. Now, the counter to this could certainly be the brutal leg kicks from Aldo. And they could take away Max's movement and his pace and even his cardio when he beat a guy up enough down low. Now, we haven't seen Aldo throwing as many of late. It could be harder on the legs as the fighter gets older. The injury certainly could be an issue. He's broke his foot before when throwing them. That certainly has to be something he's worried about, especially if in a longer fight, if he breaks it early on, the fight could be over for him. Also, the threat of the takedown, which probably won't be there in this matchup, could also be keeping him from doing it in other fights. Now, watch also for that stepping knee of Aldo to try and time Max as he steps and as he attacks. Aldo throws a very hard uppercut himself, which he'll lead with. Big right hand. That left jab snakes it out there. He's so difficult to deal with on the feet. He looked very smooth and composed against Frankie Edgar, not really bothered by anything that Frankie did, and was able to really fluster Jose in that matchup. Additionally, Aldo has shown he can wrestle. He had 5 takedowns against the Korean Zombie, 2 against Ricardo Lamas, 5 back against Hominick back in the day. And Max's takedown defense has been awesome of late, but he gave up 8 in his combined losses to Conor McGregor and Dennis Bermudez, 3 in the Feely fight. And Aldo could opt for a similar performance here, catch Max off guard, but if it doesn't work out, does that compromise his ability to keep going for a full 5 rounds? Overall, I think Holloway he's rolling, he's got a lot of momentum, he's a hungry fighter, he's looked very good, and he's continued to face an increased level of competition. For Aldo, he's been at the top of the mountain for a long time. He's still at odds with the UFC, still talking about the McGregor fight, knowing it's not probably going to happen at this point, but certainly still got to be a distraction, still be working his mind, still got to bring a little bit of doubt. And it could certainly inhibit his performance, especially against a fighter he hasn't faced before. He's faced Frankie Edgar before and beat him, so that helped him there. This is a new challenge here. I like Holloway to find success early with strikes in a very close fight, but as the fight goes on, I think Aldo's going to have a bit of that slowdown, and Max is going to keep going and put the pressure on him, show how his power is adding to his volume. Mendes showed Aldo can be hit and put into a very grueling matchup. McGregor showed you can knock him out. My prediction is Max Holloway to defeat José Aldo by knockout to become the new UFC featherweight champion. So those are my 5 main card predictions for UFC 212. I recorded this multiple times. There have been so many issues. It's taken me like 3 hours to get this done. So I'm going to keep this short. All at kamikazeoverdrive.net. The bet packs are also for sale. Please bet in the public picks. You can find me on social media. Follow me on Twitter, KO_predictions. I do my best to tweet. Not always the most active tweeter, but I'll do my best. Thanks for tuning in, guys. Thanks for my patience and my recent slump. You can see on my website, my record hasn't been that great of late when predicting fights, but we'll try and turn it around here, and we're due for one hell of a night, so let's hope it's this one. Take care, guys, and talk soon.